How we do this, we are the truest. Got these fangs super sharp, your shit toothless. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish. In the graveyard, acting foolish. Finna dance with the devil to no music. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of a podcast called Ghoulish with me, Max Booth, an undead host. On today's program, I'm talking about plagues, which is only appropriate because I'm dying from a plague right now. Well, maybe not a plague. Maybe some type of low-key bronchitis, which is ironic, I suppose, because I'm already dead. Can a ghoul get sick? Evidently, yes. Is my body continuously shutting down because I refuse to eat human flesh? Quite possibly. What happens to the dead when they die again? I don't know. I don't want to know. I don't like any of this, to be honest with you. In any case, my throat is quickly filling with phlegm. It's disgusting, and I don't recommend it. So this intro is not going to be long, folks. I'm talking with Golden B. White about plagues to promote his latest novella called Rookfield, which takes place during the 2020 pandemic. Great novella. I highly recommend the book. And we had a fun conversation talking about plagues. I'm not going to edit that cough out because it's only appropriate. It kind of ties in to the theme of the episode. Sickness. Pandemics. Plagues. I don't know why I did my Saturday Night Live voice right then. Live on Saturday night. Plagues. I could easily get a job on the SNL if I applied, but I'm not going to apply. I don't need them, and they don't need me. If you're interested in spooky books about plagues and pandemics, highly recommend Rookfield by Golden B. White. And also recently, I through the small press that I operate, Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, I promise I'll stop doing that. We announced an upcoming book by Michael Paul Gonzalez. His novel, Beneath the Salton Sea, is coming out in just a couple weeks. If you go on over to perpetualpublishing.com, you will see a little, you'll see the front cover on the homepage. Go click it, pre-order a copy. Anyone who pre-orders a paperback will get a signed, limited, signed bookplate from Michael Paul Gonzalez. Great book about the Salton Sea and technology and cosmical. If you read my anthology, Lost Signals, he has a novelette in it called How the Light Gets In, and Beneath the Salton Sea is it's basically an expanded version of that novelette. So if you liked what you've read in Lost Signals, oh golly gee, folks, you're gonna love Beneath the Salton Sea by Michael Paul Gonzalez. All right, that's all I got. I have to go blow my nose and vomit phlegm now. So enjoy my conversation with Golden B. White about plagues. I guess to begin with, what is your opinion of plagues? Are you pro-plague?
Generally I am anti-plague. I know that's controversial to take, especially here in 2021. But I've always been somebody who lives in a big city usually, so I think anti-plague is the way I go.
Where do you live in? Chicago?
I'm in Seattle these days, but I spent a long time in New York.
Yeah, I just
Although New
named
York is pretty pro plague for a while.
I just named a Phil C that came to mind. I knew you didn't live in Chicago based off of the time zone you gave me.
It could have been jet lag, so I appreciate your accommodation, regardless of where I happen to be at the moment.
I mean, that's what I try to do when I like host a podcast. I try to like think about jet lag, and sometimes the guests they appreciate that, but sometimes they don't.
Yeah, well, it's a lovely evening here, and we're sitting down to talk about plagues, which is, I think, the best way you could, wrap up a night at any time.
There's been a lot of plague content over the last 2 years. What do you think that is?
I don't know. It just seems to be occupying the popular consciousness. Who can ever say why these things just sort of appear or disappear?
One of the
I,
most annoying things about this plague is I'm about to leave the country, right? And I'm trying to Google like things to do in the UK, things as like an American I should know. And everything that pops up in my search engine is like COVID protocols. I don't want to know that. I don't need to know that. I need to know like do I handshake people? Do I like say, hey, how's it going? Do I have to say it a different way? But I'm not getting any of that content that I need because some plague is just getting in the way of that, and it's annoying to me.
well, you're going to the UK, right? Is that
Yeah,
what I? Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I think after the COVID protocols, you don't really need to know that much. I think they like sausage rolls, they like chips, but not what we call chips. They like the wrong kind of chips, which are actually French fries. And then you
yeah.
call them govna, I think. I think that's right.
You
You
have
go,
to.
oi, govna.
Hello,
And then
governor.
that's it. I've
My
just watched Mary Poppins a couple of times on the flight over.
yeah.
Practice your accent, and you'll be set.
Um, how do you think the Brits, that's what they call themselves, the Brits, how do you think they will do you think they will okay that we remade Millie Poppins with Robin Williams?
I mean, if you're gonna remake it with anybody, I think
Yeah.
he was the way to go. So I don't think they'll be too upset.
Okay, that's good.
So
You go
I was
ahead.
going to ask you, with your UK trip, are you going to have to quarantine when you get there? Is there like some sort of thing where they put you in a sealed car as soon as you get there and whisk you off to a hotel or an old asylum or something, or do
I
you get to just?
wish. So I have to take a COVID test 2 days before I leave, and I assume it has to be negative. They haven't told me that. I'm just
They don't
assuming that's
specify.
they do not. And then I have to take what is called a day two test in the UK. And guess what day I have to take that test on?
I'm hoping it's the third day, just for confusion's sake.
They say either day one or day two, which is
What?
kind of confusing. Any of those 2 days. um, and surprisingly, that was a really expensive appointment to make. It was like $165 to make this appointment. Meanwhile, the appointment I have at the fucking CVS down my street was free.
Yeah, I feel like if you walk too close to one of those these days, they lean out of the like sliding doors and just stick a Q-tip up your nose.
Yeah, I wish. So, because I like to brag about myself, last year I spent all of October on a movie set, and I had to have the COVID test 3 times a week, and
Oh,
but I discovered I quite enjoy a Q-tip being stuck up my nose. And, I mean, this is not a joke. I found it kind of soothing.
you know what? I mean, I guess this is like one of those silver linings. Like, who knows, like what sort of unknown pleasures are out there until, forces beyond your control force them upon you. So I guess if anything, maybe people are coming out of this with like a new source of enjoyment. They're like, sex is good, but have you ever got a Q-tip really deep in your nose?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping when I go to England, I can find those same streets of what was that guy? Who was that guy who did all the ripping? What was his name? Jack the Ripper. I couldn't say it
Saucy
full
Jack.
time.
Yep, that was
Yeah,
our man.
the guy who did the ripping. Jesus fucking Christ! I'm hoping I can find some of those streets and find some of those ladies and just see how much it costs to stick a Q-tip up my nose.
They call it they're gonna call it the Max Booth special after this.
I hope so. I
Like,
mean,
oh, 50 pence for a booth. And you'd be like, okay, I'll do it.
when I think of the UK, I think of plagues. Just because, like, I saw a movie once or read a book where like people will just dying in the streets of England. That seems to be a thing in my head. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you think people have died in the streets of England due to plague?
Probably. I mean, I feel like Europe in general, I think of, I have an American's view, obviously, of anything outside of our borders. And I do view a lot of that as being very dark and gray and plague ridden. I mean, I know they had a Black Death at some point,
Yeah.
and I think England was a country then. It must have been. It's been around for a bit. I don't know if they had streets. I don't know when streets were invented.
Well, they
I
had those
assume.
strange streets, like Hills had to walk on, but it wasn't smooth, so they always stripped. Like big cracks in the streets, and like if you walked down the sidewalk, you had to like constantly look up and make sure someone wasn't dumping a bucket of feces on you, which is probably how the plague got spread.
Yeah, I'm sure it didn't help. I mean, I can't think of any place I've been to where, having feces dumped on you was like a part of the appeal of going.
I don't know if this is true, but someone once told me this, and I've always believed it. But the term shit-faced evidently comes from the fact that you had to be home at a certain time of the milning, because if you will not, you risked getting poop dumped on you, because everyone dumped the buckets at a certain time. But
Oh
sometimes you
man.
would stay up all night drinking, and then you would forget, you would be coming home, and then you get shit on your face.
Oh, I could see that. There's that time in the morning, if you like work in an office when everybody like has their coffee and runs out. And I assume it's the same thing, back in the olden days, and they would get up and be like, well, time to empty the chamber pots. And whatever poor straggler still in his cups was wandering down the street just got rained on his parade quite terribly.
I'm assuming they have toilets now in England. If anyone's listening can vouch for that, please write in to the show.
Yes, please send in those comments.
I'm a really nervous person when it comes to using the bathroom, and I don't know how I would do with a bucket.
Well, you know what they do? They call the bathroom the loo there, or the WC, which is short for water closet.
Wait, what?
Although,
The WC? Isn't that a
yeah,
channel about with teen dramas?
I mean, that is pretty shitty as well. So I think that's where it got its name.
Okay, interesting. I knew about the loo, which is something I refuse to call it. It's not going to happen. I'm going to call it the American bathroom.
Excuse me, Governor, where is your American style bathroom?
Does it flush the correct way? So I'm gonna get killed when I'm in the UK. That's already been established. Either by someone who rips or someone else. Who knows?
Somebody who plagues, somebody who puts a Q-tip too far in the wrong place.
I do want to talk about plagues. I also want to talk about this book I read mostly in one sitting today, called Rookfield, which is about the pandemic. Even though I don't think COVID is actually said anywhere in the book. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, it's not. Although I think based on the timing and some of the ways people behave and some of the protocols surrounding masks and stuff, you could put it together if you had been alive in this last couple of years.
I kept waiting for like some type of like Simpsons Treehouse of Hill twist, because you do not mention COVID, that it was going to be revealed like, no wait, this is the plague that turns everyone's skin inside out.
I see. I didn't want to use the word COVID because that way I'm like hoping Mike Flanagan will be like, oh man, another thing where people don't mention the very obvious, like, threat and right in the middle.
Yeah.
So.
Shout out to Mike Flanagan.
Maybe he knows about bathrooms in the UK. If you do, write into the show.
Is he British?
He filmed Bly Manor, or he was involved with that, and that was pretty British.
Yeah, but did anyone watch it?
I assume that he did to edit it, or
interesting.
Maybe. I don't actually know.
I'll keep note of that. So going back to Rookfield, you in the acknowledgments or the after note, I don't know what it's called in the book, you mentioned that you began writing this in the year of 2020. Now, what inspired this book?
It's funny. But all jokes aside, like I started actually
Yeah.
writing it during July, I think June or July of 2020, after I'd been like stuck at work from home since February. And it was like one of those projects you do to keep yourself busy because I couldn't go to the gym, I couldn't go out, I couldn't do anything. And so I started writing this book, and I started with doing like one sentence a day. I was like, I need to get back into some kind of habit of writing. So I was like, I'm going to take the pressure off, and I'm just going to start as simple as possible. So I started with, I think what's now actually the first sentence of the book, about this guy on a cell phone talking to his lawyer. And so every night before bed, I'd add just a little bit more and a little bit more. And then eventually it took on sort of its mass. But, as I wrote it, the pandemic, got deeper
Yeah.
and deeper. It started looking like less and less like it was going to be over soon. And so the book, I think, got bleaker and bleaker as it went further on, and then through the revisions.
That's interesting. Do you typically write like only a few sentences at a time?
No, I'm definitely usually one of those. So in the past, I've been very much like a binge writer, but like finally in the year or so before the pandemic, I'd gotten into like a really good daily writing habit. I would like go into my office building early, and I'd sit at the little Starbucks down there and drink like a giant coffee and write for like an hour before I had to go into like the office and actually do work. And then once the pandemic hit and I couldn't do that anymore, like if I'm at home, like I've got no discipline, like I can't get out of bed before 11 a.m. So all of a sudden that was all gone. And so like it just sort of collapsed on me in around February. And so, writing this and taking that very like low pressure way to start was a way of sort of trying to rebuild, my writing practice and
Yeah.
get something, mostly just like, I had to spend all this time in my own head. So it was better to be there with some characters than just alone for a while.
At what point do you think the COVID and the pandemic like hit you like oh this is happening?
It was probably around that summer. I mean, I knew it was going to be over by Easter, like some large and loud people had said, but I thought, you know, I had this great hope that it was going to be, because in Washington State, we did the sort of lockdown and the social distancing, and most of the people I know were like very good about that. And I was like, oh, this is going to happen. The spike is going to flatten. Things are going to look up. We're all going to get back to normal. And I was still like, trying to work out and stuff and be like, oh, I'm going to have a summer body, and like now I have like a body for 6 summers. um and then I think around the summer I was like, this is not going to happen. Like there's not going to be any vacation this year, there's not going to be any trips, like I'm not going to like, there's nowhere that's open where I can go and like see friends and stuff.
Yeah.
And it just, I think it hit me then, and I was like, I got to do something or I'm going to lose my mind.
Right. I think with me, it was probably around late March or April when it really like hit me that this wasn't like just something in the news. I had to go to the doctor. I had a medical appointment, and when I went into the office, the lobby had all these signs and like notifications, like
Yeah.
if you have a high temp, please tell us immediately, and all this stuff about COVID, and it just really like hit me like, oh shit, maybe this is something I should be concerned about. And then like a week or two later, maybe the hotel I was looking at, we got like mask mandates, and that was pretty nuts. Just because I just you just don't. It's easy to shake stuff off and assume it's not actually going to be as bad as it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think for me, because I was fortunate enough to be able to work from home and to work remotely. And at first, it's like when you're a kid and there's like a snow day or like, some sort of significant weather event, and you're like, oh yeah, it's like work from home day. And then, as it goes on, you're like, oh my God, are we ever getting out? Are people okay? Like the damage starts like, sinking into you, and you're like, this is not fun anymore. This is now, a little bit scary.
Yeah, I mean, how will you like taking like the news of like, oh, every grocery store is out of stock and no one has anything and the supply chain is just gone. Like when did that happen? 2020 feels like such a long year. I can't even remember at what point that stuff began happening. But like we no longer had anything that we
Yeah.
could go buy. It was like that's never happened in my lifetime.
No, and you know, again, it's like the weather thing. Like everybody has like a run on like the worst types of food. You know, you go in and like all the bread and milk is gone. It's like, who are these people who need this much bread and this much milk? But then you start going a little bit crazy too. You're like, oh my God, I want bread and milk. Like, what am I missing out on?
Yeah, the same with like toilet paper. That was a big one.
That
Uh,
was huge here too. Yeah.
but I was lucky because I managed to just steal a bunch at the hotel I was looking at. So I avoided
Uh,
that disaster. But I know a lot of people, I don't know what they were doing. I think bidets made a big comeback.
well, you know what? This like the Q-tip in the nose are some of those like, you know, pleasures that have been hidden away from people. And now they're going to like
Yeah.
secretly, when people like talk about how bad the plague years were, they're going to be like, yeah, but I did find out I really like being washed clean as opposed to using paper.
I've never used one. I'm not opposed to it. My buddy Andrew, he has one in his house, and he had one before the pandemic. I don't know what got him on this bidet train, but he was prepared. Maybe he knew something no one else knew, but he seems to love it. So maybe one day I'll also get one. I asked him to buy me one for Christmas because I find it highly embarrassing to purchase my own bidet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And you know, sometimes you'll see people be like, "Oh, I really love my bidet." Like you visit their house or something, and then you'll see it's like this old one from like the 80s. It's like a giant like machine that like spritzes cold water like out of like a drinking fountain nozzle. And you're like, what in the world are these people talking about? But some of the new bidets, I admit, like look pretty good.
I've
Although
never.
I think
Go
I
ahead.
think like I think like bidets are like a step too close to like cold showers and like other sort of like weird aesthetic things that I'm not into.
That's okay. I don't think I've ever seen a bidet like up close or even from a distance. I don't know what they look like.
You know what? You should ask them when you get to the UK. You should ask them for an American style bathroom, but ask them if they have a bidet as well. And then they're like, well, "How can we accommodate this?" And you'll be like, "I'm Max Booth. Give me a Q-tip. Give me a bidet. And get the hell out."
Wait, are bidets like common in the UK? You think is that? I mean, where are they common at? Is that France?
I assume it's a French word, but
Yeah,
I feel like all of Europe is very classy. They have I'm sure they have like a whole like buffet of like, you know, post toilet cleaning options there.
I'm gonna call that bidet and see what happens. Bidet.
Don't know why you named it after our president, but you know, give it to me. I'm an American.
God bless you. So, will you at all nervous about like releasing a book that is so directly about what everyone's going through right now? Because you often see like online, like, oh, we don't need anything to remind us of what's going on right now, which I think is bullshit personally. But I wonder like how you like kind of were thinking about it.
I mean, there's two different ways. Because at the time when I wrote it, you know, I was like, I wrote it and I like submitted it to Trepidatio, you know, in Journal Stone, and they accepted it for publication. And then I got the publication date set, and it was, you know, October 2021, and I submitted it back in like fall of 2020, and I was like, oh my God, no one's gonna remember this. I'm like, October 2021 is gonna roll around. We're all gonna have vaccines. We're gonna have like taken things responsibly. Like the plague is gonna be a distant memory, and like no one's gonna want to read about it. They're gonna be like, what was that? That like 6-month blip? And of course, now here we are, and it's still fucking going on.
Do you think it's gonna stop?
I mean, that's me knocking on wood. I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't know. But I've come around sort of on that because I think, you know, when we like make like books or whatever kind of like art we're working on, you know, we got to do it for ourselves first and foremost. And there's no sense in trying to sanitize what you feel. I mean, you know, how people react to it when it comes out is a different matter. But, you know, I don't think I could have not, you know, written a book that dealt with this.
Yeah.
And so I just got to hope that, you know, that people enjoy reading like my grappling with it. So
I love this book, man. I love the protagonist. He's such a sleaze.
thank you. I mean, I should clarify that is intentional because I think sometimes people don't realize that like I think this guy's an asshole too. Like
Have
like
you
he was
gotten
very much
any?
intended to be.
Have you gotten any like, oh shit, Golden White is anti-mask, get him?
Not yet, but I'm assuming that like once it starts getting out into the world, people will start doing that.
I see it happening. So yeah, I'm glad you also ill prepared. But I mean that's just from people who don't understand what books are, or how to read properly. I loved it. I thought it was a really bold choice, field protagonist, and he was just so much fun to read.
Thanks. I mean, when I set out to like write this guy, like you know how as you go through a process, like you begin to see somebody like more and more clearly.
Yeah.
And like by the end, I realized that this guy is like in his own mind, he's an action hero. Like he's the
Mhm.
man of action. He's the like literally the protagonist. He's the one who takes the steps to drive things forward. Except every time he does it, it's the wrong move. Like it just makes things worse and worse.
It's really much like a like a shithead Liam Neeson.
Yeah, exactly.
So for those who don't know much about what the book is, do you want to give like a brief breakdown of the plot so they know what the hell we're talking
Oh, right.
about?
Yeah. Before we go too far. Yeah. So it's about a man named Cabot Howard who has an ex-wife and a son. And his ex-wife takes his son and absconds during the middle of the pandemic to go hide out at her relative's house in this small rural town called Rookfield. And so Cabot, thinking he knows best, sets off to bring his son home after he gets a voicemail saying, Dad, I'm scared. He says, all right, I'm going to go save my son. And so despite everybody trying to stop him, he goes and he goes to this town to save him. But when he gets to the town, he finds out that, despite his own sort of cavalier approach to masking and dealing with the pandemic, the people in this town take it very, very seriously. The adults all wear like cloth or paper face masks. And all the little kids he sees are wearing these full-on plague doctor style leather bird masks. And of course, when he goes to get his son, they say, no, no. And so he ends up in conflict with his in-laws, with his town, with his son, with himself. And as somebody who just can't take no for an answer, he continues to push and push and push until things start to break.
The like the basic inciting incident of like, the custody issue going on and how she takes the kid and then like there's not a lot going on with the cults can do because of COVID and everything's kind of shut down. What led to like that idea specifically? Because it's so fucking realistic. I know so many people right now. Well, by saying it that way, it sounds like I know dozens of people in custody issues. I know like two, but like, yeah, I know these people who have custody issues and things will be drawn out so long because of how COVID has impacted the way these things will handled. Things will just be
Yeah.
delayed and delayed, and it's ruining lives.
No, it's true. So I've always liked stories that are like siege stories, like where people are like under siege or like where they're isolated. But I think it's much more interesting when the thing that's isolating them or like forcing them to do stuff isn't necessarily physical. So I liked this idea of like him like having this problem and he can't solve it because, I mean, I've seen too, like the court systems like just shut down for basically a year and you couldn't get any in-person stuff, and things that are, deemed to be lower priority kept getting shuffled off. And so, having that idea, I think I was like, this is a guy who's going to take action and, take matters into his own hands. And I sort of like that idea of not being able to have recourse, especially too for somebody who, like, this main character comes from a pretty privileged position. So not being able to exert his will by like, using
Yeah.
those systems to his benefit, he's now got nothing to do but like hop in his car and drive off.
So if for some reason this podcast survives, like yields and yields, and someone is listening to this in the way future, and they're hoping to get some type of sense of what 2020 and 2021 was like. I mean, we mentioned the cults will shut down, and I mean, it would be odd if we didn't include the fact that for pretty much 12 straight months, crime was just legal. Like you could just kill somebody and there was no consequences. It was a wild time to be alive.
Yeah. But then, everybody sort of who could stayed in their home too. So they all kind of like ignored it. Like, it's such a weird thing.
Yeah.
When we were talking about like plagues and stuff and throwing that idea around, like I thought, I looked at things like plague houses, and in the book too, there's a big old house sort of type thing. But it's funny because in the old days, they used to take the people who were sick and they would like shove them all into
Yeah.
a plague house, or what they called a pest house, or a fever shed if you were in Canada. Um, and they would stick the sick people in there, and they'd be like, all right, sick people, you stay there, and like all us healthy people are going to go out and like enjoy our times, and then make sure to leave a note when you die.
Yeah.
Except now it's gone the opposite way.
Exactly. Yeah. I a long time ago, I looked into plague houses, and I always thought this would be a great setting for a book, but I haven't gotten to it, and I'm still going to do it despite reading this book because the idea is really different. But anyway, it's fucking crazy because like city officials would like come house to house to check on you, and if you had like the smallpox or something, they would take you to this house and then set your residence on fucking file to get rid of the disease. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, like when you think about like anti-vax people and all these people, I mean, it's really easy like to frown on them and talk shit about them. But like when you have that historical stuff in context, I would also have been afraid back then of like any of the government, anyone knowing about what
Yeah.
I had. They would come and take you and shove you into this house, and either you. I mean, you would get it. You would definitely get it even if you didn't have it. You had
Yeah.
it then when you were in that house, and either you would die or you would recover.
And probably not recover, right?
Yeah. It's terrifying. Also, that's real the phrase pox on your house comes from, right?
Oh God. Oh, but that makes sense. I was thinking though that what you would do now actually is, I'm going to be honest, Plague House sounds like a really great like reality TV show, like a version of like Love Island or Big Brother or something,
I'm
where
listening.
you just go like, all you people who like have COVID or like don't want to like get vaccinated or masks, just come and live in this big house together, and we'll film it, and we'll use the advertising budget to pay for your medical bills, and that way you can either die or you can get it and recover and leave.
I mean, isn't that what they're kind of doing with any segment of Fox News?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. They're just doing it like on the like state level. Oh my God.
Yeah, just come to like any like 2 out of 5 houses in Texas, and you will find a plague house.
Oh man.
Yeah.
You know what else? I was looking up plague houses, and I was thinking about them, and I found the origin of the word quarantine, which is, it's from a word quarantina, from Venetian, which is I guess similar to like Latin or Italian back in the 14th to 15th century. But quarantina was because there were 40 days that the sailors and passengers on ships would have to stay on the ship to prove they weren't sick before they were allowed like onto the docks and to like disembark. But apparently before it was a quarantina, there was a 30-day thing, which was the Trentino. And I was like, oh, it's a good thing we didn't get like Trentino, because that would not be nearly as exciting. We have quarantine now, but if we had like Trentine.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, we know even better is if it was only 20 days, because then I assume that would be a venti. And so anytime you go to like Starbucks, you should be like, give me a plague grande, please. Or a plague mocha. And they'd be like, okay, you mean a venti? And you're like, whatever, you know what I mean.
This is terrible, I have to be honest. I would love it though. It would be a much dumber pandemic if we had to call it a venti.
Yeah. Well, then finally the people in Fox News would know what it was. And they wouldn't be like, what is this venti stuff? And you're like, oh, it's another venti you can hate on.
Oh no, a pumpkin spice quarantine. Great. Great. Well, the plague houses, yeah. I don't have much else to say about them because it's really difficult to research online, because if you type in say Pox House, which is what I've always known them as, all you get on Google is the Wikipedia page and many reviews for an episode of the show House, which is called A Pox on Your House. So thanks a lot, the TV show House. I've never seen the show, never gonna know.
It's SEO ruining everything. They're just people getting paid like content mill bucks to like churn out articles on pox on your house episodes, preventing people like us from doing legitimate research on pox houses to talk about them
Yeah, I mean,
after we exhaust the.
it's kind of a plague of the internet.
It is. I mean, it feels like it's impossible to look up anything. Like I remember this old man yells at cloud. I remember the golden days of the mid internet when you could look up useful information just by typing in words. And now, of course, it's like, oh, would you like to get the best reviewed plague houses? We'll look for plague houses in your neighborhood. Hot plague houses want to talk to you. And you're just like, come on, guys. How is everything made into an advertisement?
I mean, that's not even a joke, because if you do type in plague houses, you do find like historical sites that you can go visit, and you see like like who the fuck reviews a plague house now? I don't know. I wish I had read them before doing this episode, though. I didn't think about it, but you can go on Google and look at reviews of historical plague houses.
There's one apparently in here in Washington, except they call it like a historical quarantine facility, or no, it's not a facility because it's clearly not a facility.
Yeah.
It's like a 1-bedroom facility, right? It's like historical quarantine zone, not even zone. I wish I could remember what it was, but I refuse to look it up at this point because we've reached that point where I'm just going to make stuff up.
Yeah, you're just gonna get an advertisement for the TV show House. So why even bother at this point? If you were like held prisoner in a pox house, how would you spend the time?
You know, having been held in a not pox house, but all the things I thought I would do, like read a lot or like write a lot or,
Yeah.
do prison yard exercises like push-ups or something. No, I'm not gonna do shit. I probably just sit around and stare at the wall and wait for the plague to take me.
Did you maybe this might be a sensitive topic, so we can not talk about it, but did you get any glimpses, brushes against COVID? Like, did you get any positive testing?
No, I mean, again, fortunate enough that my lifestyle allows me to just sort of barricade myself in.
Yeah.
We had some extended family members who tested positive, but fortunately it was nothing major. So we've, not had any like deaths or, very serious illnesses.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
What a dumb time to be alive.
I say that very often, but I don't think I've ever said it as much as I have in 2020 and 2021.
Really frustrating time, I think, man. Just so much of it just feels so like avoidable, and there's nothing like you or I personally could do to make it not happen, and it's happening. And sometimes I feel really hopeless that it's just going to keep happening, and even when this one's done, we'll just get hit with a new one, and this will just be life now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you're on like public transit or something, and you're moving in a direction, but you got no control over the speed. You got no control over like when you can stop or who's around you. And you're just like, how is this happening? Like, can we not all like agree that being on the bus sucks and we're all going to like make it okay by, treating each other well or like trying to help the bus driver get there on time? And no, just, I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that, in another year or two, I'll be writing a very positive and uplifting book, Plague Hope Punk or something, but
oh my God,
I don't think that's in my nature. So
you could write
probably
like
just see Rookfield too.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any plans to continue exploring the universe established in this book? Because I easily can see more books like as standalone pieces. Developed a great little village.
It's funny because there was a part when I was like, doing sort of the thinking about it. Like I spent, a lot of time in the shower thinking about things. And I did start to develop like a backstory to this place, like historical Rookfield or like what might happen after the end of the story. So there is a possibility for that.
It feels really much like how Matthew Bartlett has Leeds or like Stephen King has Castle Rock. I mean, Rookfield does feel like a town that you could easily set so many little stories in.
Yeah, and I'm beginning to think about that too as I sort of decide what next project to work on and sort of let the creative juices go where they will.
Before we end this, I would love to talk about. I don't even know if he has a name in this book, but Fool's a boy who the main character meets shortly after arriving in Rookfield that I love. I love the
Yeah.
way he talks and acts. Is he? I mean, you wrote this little boy like he was straight out of the movie Gummo, and I loved it.
Oh, thanks. No, I don't think he has a name. I mean, a lot of these people don't, but I know who you mean. So I didn't know it was going to be a novella at first, and I thought it was going to be a short story, and obviously that's not the case. But I began writing that first scene, sort of where Cabot's in his car driving, talking to his lawyer, saying, I'm going to set out on an adventure. And then I wrote the next part was his first encounter in Rookfield, where he gets yelled at by a gas station attendant. And then he meets the little boy. He turns around. He's looking for direction. He turns around and sees this tiny kid wearing a plague mask, who he said talks like he's out of Gummo. And I was thinking very much of like those old Looney Tunes cartoon characters, like where there's like a little like mob boss or something who's got a cigar. It's like, see here. So I think that part though is like once like I started writing that character and the way he talks, the way he's like packing his cigarettes and stuff. That's when I was like, oh, this thing is too big for a novella. Like if this little like character is this interesting and this much fun, there's definitely going to be more and more out there. So that's when I started exploring it and sort of ballooned out. So, I'm glad you enjoyed that.
It makes sense. That's interesting. Well, hey, man, thank you for coming on and doing this episode. I had a ton of fun with you. Before we end, why don't you please go ahead and tell the folks how to find you online?
So fortunately, it's quite easy to find me online as long as you remember to include my middle initial. So I'm Gordon B. White on Facebook. I'm at Gordon B. White on Twitter. I'm Gordon B. White on Instagram. And if there's any social media profiles I set up and forgot to do, I'm Gordon B. White there as well. Also, too, I'm online at gordonbwhite.com. So those are the places you can find me. And, I promote my stuff as well as other people who I really like. So if you're looking for more interesting reads, whether or not they be Rookfield related, reach out to me there. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. And, next year in person? ?
Okay, and that was Golden B. White talking about plagues. Go pick up his new novella, Rookfield. And go on over to perpetualpublishing.com to see the newest and the latest titles coming out through Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing. Leave a review of the podcast on iTunes and any other place you can review a podcast. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/PMM Publishing. And sign up on the newsletter, the Ghoulish Times.substack.com. Enjoy!
Live spooky, die spooky.
Rest in peace, Max.